Hey everyone, Carla here again, seeking answers, talking with my friend Charles. Hey Charles.
G'day, how are you?
I'm good. I'm very excited, for want of a better term, to get to this question, this explosive question that we're going to cover today about why. Right. This is tens of thousands of transfusion recipients, like my father, for one.
In fact, that's the biggest amount of victims. So to explain who are the victims of the Australian contaminated blood scandal, well, we've spoken about that, haven't we, Carla? There are all these thousands of families that copped tainted blood when one of their family members went into hospital and received blood.
And it seems to me that there was a monumental problem with the culture, the mentality around the blood supplies. Would you agree with this?
I think that's a very good assessment, Carla. And they brought these British protocols, and you know, these we copy so much of the British healthcare system down here, right? And so we brought this British protocols on managing a blood supply from the British. And in the 1970s, you know, the British knew that the blood supply that they had was highly compromised by viruses. And the next thing you know, we're asking these people to send their specialists down to Australia, and they turn up here in the 1970s and they start, you know, telling us how to run a blood supply, and they start telling us to have these haemophilia treatments and these haemophilia protocols and blood transfusion protocols, and, you know, how to manage things like blood transfusions, right? But it seems to be that safety was not the paramount concern. And so it wasn't the paramount concern in England. And we know that because they've got an infected blood inquiry right now that's happening in the UK. And it's become clear that safety was not the overarching paramount concern of authorities there in the 1970s before a lot of these British protocols came to Australia. So it meant that when you had the risk of something like HIV or a calamity like HIV, because we have that risk in society, that there'll always be new and emerging viruses and problems, right? We've got that with COVID-19 right now, okay? But what you don't want to do is play games with those things. So you don't want to like specifically look to take blood from people who might be at risk of viruses, right?
Why would authorities take blood from a prisoner or from a sex worker and then risk the life by giving it to a hospital patient?
Because this is the blood business in the 1970s, 1980s, Australia. It was the Wild West down here, and authorities don't want the rest of the world to know. That's why this never gets raised. That's why you'll never find any official figures on the amount of people who've lost their life or been harmed by contaminated blood in Australia. It's Australia's biggest business. What they were doing was they were basically driving up the blood stocks, the blood donations at any cost, and the cost was safety and patients' lives. So basically, to collect all this blood that they needed to make their products and get this blood business happening, they basically decided to throw safety away, and it was the Wild West. Australia's blood supply was run by cowboys, and you know, they killed thousands of patients. And
why is it that they gave the impression that the blood donations were coming from fellow Australians wanting to help a brother or sister, when in fact, again, that's not the truth? They were sourcing blood from foreign infected donors. Why then? Why did they allow that to be mixed into our supply, our blood supply?
God, you know, I wish on behalf of so many people that I knew that lost their lives to this, that they didn't do that. So that's the first thing I want to say. I just want to acknowledge the loss for haemophiliacs who died because of foreign blood being mixed into the Australian blood supply. I just want to say I'm very, very sorry on behalf of Australia that ever happened. It should never have been allowed to happen. Now, why would they ever do such a thing? And so the culture here, how did this happen? Why did this happen? Every step of the way, look at the timeline. The whole emphasis has been on blood stocks, driving up the blood stocks. Never mind the safety, Never mind the fact that they've got decades of information of people being infected with deadly viruses. It's all about driving up the stocks because they want to use it to build up this company, CSL. And, you know, what did they do? In 1991, they started the process of privatizing CSL. So, you know, the whole thing has been about business. Right? You'd think that if a company like CSL had killed 1,400 Australian patients, you'd think it'd be on Wikipedia. It's not. You won't find this anywhere. No one wants to know. Why? Because it's Australia's biggest business. Now, look, let's talk about it. Chernobyl, Russian authorities stuffed up, they swept it under the carpet. But did Chernobyl, you know, did that nuclear plant become Russia's biggest business afterwards? Because that's what happened here with our ground zero. We had an event that took place in 1978. And what it did, we had an event that took place in the 80s. Thousands and thousands of blood transfusion victims ended up with viruses. They ended up with HIV. They ended up with hepatitis C. We had thousands of deaths. We had all these people lose loved ones. We had...
Well, you've just blown my mind saying that. Like, just, I had no idea. I had no idea myself. This is
We've been locked down here. We've been locked down here for decades fighting this massive company. No one knows about what's happened here. I've lost so many friends down here. We've got the head of our haemophilia campaign is a guy called Greg Ball. He's had liver cancer. He's had bowel cancer. He's been offered palliative care. He's fighting for his life. He's been fighting for ages. So have other haemophiliacs who've survived the CSL contaminated products. We've got thousands of blood transfusion victims who get no help. They live disabled every day. We have their relatives. We've got children who've lost their parents. It's a absolute living nightmare, and it's been that way for decades. That's the truth. You know, that was mad. They put commercial considerations before safety considerations. And then I think what's happened in the 1980s, when they realized, wow, when people are becoming ill and lots of people are dying, I think they've realized that they've made a terrible decision from their policy of collecting blood from high-risk donors, from prisoners, from drug addicts, from prostitutes, from people who use drugs and shared needles. They realized at that moment, when AIDS exploded, they realized that they had criminally done the wrong thing. And so at that moment, they decided to change the narrative, Carla. They decided to say that it was all an unavoidable accident. And they just hoped that Australia would never, ever...
My family got. That's the story my family got.
That's the story that I got. And that's the story that we've all got. And that's the story that other children who lost their parents got. And that's the story that people got who lost their businesses, their homes, and their lives. Well, now we're seeing the evidence. And I invite people to look at the evidence themselves on our timeline. And I also like to thank you, Carla, very, very much for actually taking interest in this. This isn't easy for you to do. It's a very tough subject matter, as you can see. And you know, I thank you for doing it, because this is the sort of subject that no one will come near us. They won't come near us, Carla. We've just talked about why has this not happened. I've been doing this for 30 years. I've had very little interest. But, you know, I am someone who cares about Australia. I love Australia. I love the UK too. I like the British people. I like the Scottish people. I like Welsh people very much. Welsh in particular. I've got Welsh blood. But yeah, like, you know what I mean? I just want us to get, why are we still asking questions like this all these years later? So why is it that we've got these governments that have let us down? You know? And why can't we have these answers? Why can't we know what happened?
Yeah, it's just got to happen. I don't see how it can't happen. It's got to see how it can't happen.
And please, if people could fill out our support form on infectedbloodaustralia.com, there's a form there where you can, you know, if you're a victim maybe, come and join us and we'll see if we can help you.